Okay, hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Impactors Out Loud with me, your host, Tracy B. Allen. And today I have with me Carole Burton. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Carole, and then we're going to get right into the interview. So, Carole excels in enhancing communication flexibility and self awareness. She promotes well being, builds strong networks, and fosters self reflection. Carole guides leaders and teams through transformative growth by nurturing curiosity and adaptability. With hands-on experience in sales, purchasing, and corporate procurement, she offers deep insight into decision-making impacts. Carole holds a master's in leadership studies and is certified in intercultural development inventory and Wiley brand everything disc assessment. Additionally, she can certify individuals as mental health first aiders. Didn't know that was a thing until I spoke to Carole, but we're going to get into that too. Providing crucial support in time of need. Carole, welcome to Impactors Out Loud. I'm so happy to have you. And I know that our audience is going to be blown away by the information that you're going to share with us today.
It is an absolute honor and pleasure. It's so amazing to be with you right now and how everything is moving in life.
Yes.
I know it's an interesting time.
It is.
It's
amazing. It really is.
It really is. And it's amazing to be alive right now. So one thing that I've really been adopting lately is I ask people, how are you doing right now? Not yesterday, not tomorrow, right now, in the present moment. And I think that that's one way that we can take care of each other with a very simple question. And so that's why, before you and I came on, I asked a question, how are you doing right now? It's not just how you doing, how are you doing right now? Right. I think that just has us stop for a moment to be in our present, while we're in the presence of each other.
And I think that question makes people not get on the defense. Because like I shared with you before, usually, we make a lot of small talk. And when you meet somebody, you're like, or you're sending an email or you get on the phone with somebody, you're like, hey, how you doing? Yeah. But if the person says anything else but okay, then all of a sudden the tone shifts and that person is like exiting stage left quickly because they don't want you to trauma dump on them. Whatever is really happening in your life, they don't want to know. They just want you to, it's just pleasantries. I'm okay. That's all they want to hear. Anything outside, I'm okay, is an issue for them. I think that's a very intentional question that will garner an intentional response.
Correct.
So I like that question.
Yeah.
So, Carole, why don't you tell us what your cause tale is? How did you get into this industry? Give us your backstory.
Sure. So it's been a lifelong journey. I've always been a lifelong learner, and my life has never been an ordinary path.
Okay.
I was actually challenged as a child. Do you want to take the easy way or you want to do the way you need to do?
Okay. And who gave you that challenge?
Right? My parents.
Your parents, okay.
Yeah. My mother was an educator.
Okay.
My father, my mother was an educator, elementary ed. And my father was an educator in his own way, being in the community with the organization that he worked for. And so it was one of those where from a very young age, I knew what my purpose was. Generationally. That stemmed from my father. My mother's family did the same, but my father's was more primary. It was more focal point. And we had to choose, right? We could choose how we wanted to play in that space of what our purpose is. And then as I got older, I appreciated how my mother's family and her purpose and my father's family and his purpose generationally connected. And so we live in this it was very clean. It was very clear. The question was how? What was the pathway? So I was always asking, and I really realized this when I started to become a student of what I call my ACT of series: active listening, active and active observing. And the latest one I've added is active hope. And when I was a child, I was, I'm from I'm Generation X. I study multiple generations. There's 5 generations in my family. And what happened was the saying, be seen and not heard. I never took that saying as a negative.
No.
In fact, it created curiosity. So curiosity has always been part of my realm. And so I always ask myself rhetorical questions. And that has carried me through my entire adult career, my whole career. I was always asking rhetorical questions, seeking answers that were much bigger than I. Never saying, did I answer the question? And yet I did, right? And so the be seen and not heard, once my parents realized that I was actively observing. Notice when you put the word active in front, it pulls into a different perspective, because that's how I see life. I see life in a very much different perspective, from a different lens point. And so when I went into this active observing, my parents realized, Carole is beginning to understand. Then they would put me in situations where my mother would say, sit back and watch. Sit back and listen. That's where active listening showed up. Okay. So then anytime we would do an event, or we would participate or host or whatever that thing is, we always decompress it. We always analyze the experience. We would actually have family meetings of that. How did you feel? What did that look like? Tell me more. What was your takeaway? That's the teacher. Both of them were teachers. And so anytime we still do that to this day. Yeah. We still carry on that today, because then it's okay. What was the lesson learned? What was the information gained? And so when I really started listening actively in my adult life, I really realized how to create meaningful relationships. So I started off in sales. And so I realized that when I went on the other side of purchasing, to the dark side of the yin and the yang of relationship of procurement and right, and sales, which is really operations. That's really what it is, right?
It is. Yeah. Or logistics, depending on what part.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's go together. And it was really interesting, because even though I didn't understand what purchasing was, and I needed to take coursework, and I need to understand that skill of purchasing and procurement and negotiations in that way, the one thing I brought with me was understanding the art. I consider it as an art and a science of meaningful relationships, right? And so when I created that, what I learned as a salesperson was, it's not just about me hitting my numbers and selling product. No. It's much bigger than that. It was what ways I live in, what and why. What and why? What and why? What and why? When I live in what and why and curiosity, the how shows up. That's the pathway. How is the plan? The what and the why is the space, is where we live. Plus, the fact those are 3 power. If we start with those three words, that is more investigative. Excuse me, that's more an exploratory, not so much to understand, but to actually solve and create. And so, when I was in the what and why, I was like, oh, wait a minute. This just isn't about me selling candy. I was a candy lady at first. I sold candy and snacks.
Okay.
It wasn't about, it was great. It wasn't just selling confection or snacks. It was really about the relationship that I was developing with that buyer. And then it became deeper. Then I took it to a next level. I took it down a notch. And it was, I need to help my buyer solve their problem. Therefore, it was never about me as a salesperson. So once I understood their angst, their what numbers, how much they needed to save, how much of programming they needed to do, like all of those idiosyncrasies, all those pieces, parts, components, that is how I developed meaningful relationships from a very basic space. I took that and literally and just brought it over when I became a purchaser to say, okay, Now I'm in that seat of cost savings, cost avoidance, cost reductions with high quality. Okay. That's when I learned about production in a whole different way from that lens point, and hence my negotiation skills, my mediation skills, that all like really came into form. By understanding that in my relationship in that, as that my responsibility, the nice thing was that I understood how salespeople work.
Yeah.
I understood how salespeople work. Well, therefore, I was always about, I know you're a salesperson. This is what I need to do. I know what you need to do. So let's not play a game, and let's form a
Exactly.
real partnership that's high quality. And then that ripple affected everything we did on both sides of our organizations to be better together. Very simple. Very simple.
Yeah.
So that's how I took that, because I understood that, because I was in that in sales for so long. And the greatest thing that I had to do was shift in my mind was, first I was in retail selling candy. Then I was in industrial manufacturing, realizing how something comes from nothing. Right. And so when I was in retail, the questions were, because I started in a chain, as assistant store manager. My rhetorical question was, how does something come from nothing? Or excuse me, how does it get to the shelf? That was the first question. That's when I became a salesperson, right? Because then I figured out how something got to the shelf. Then the next question was, what is the process of something coming from nothing? That's when I went into manufacturing, right?
Okay.
Right. As far as a client has an issue, a customer has an issue, but there's no resolution. There's no thing. I learned how that thing came from nothing to become something.
Something. Got you.
So then the next question was, well, where do I take this? And so that's how I created the business, to be honest with you.
Okay.
It was also in the space of me learning about transitions. So I've become a student of transitions in an organization, a team, a group, and more so as an individual. So when I say to people, are you doing the work? My conversation is, the work is, what is the personal work you're working through to understand the situation that you're in, to really step back and learn from the lessons that you thought you had learned, but you really hadn't. And where do you find your purpose in all of that, regardless of what you're doing? So that's where I play with skills, gifts, and talents, because I needed to define what my own skills, I had to understand what those three words mean, number one. And then how do they fit in what I'm doing, and more so who I am being.
Right.
So that's where I play right now is the one thing I learned being a candy lady, was the only constant in life is change. Okay.
Yeah.
So if the only constant in life is change, it's kind of like Dr. Maya Angelou would say, when a person reveals themselves, believe it. Same exact thought.
Exactly.
My follow-up was, now what you going to do about it? So I do the same thing with, the only constant in life is change. Okay, now that you know that, what is your next? What is
you
that?
said so many things that I can piggyback off of. It's like crazy. So one of the things that you talked about was the fact that your mom was an educator, and you would have debriefings at the end of each day, right? I was an educator, and I had debriefings with my kids at the end of each day. I still have debriefings now. We go out, something happens, I say, oh, remind me to talk about that later, right? And then we get in the car, and on our drive home, we're talking about our experience at the restaurant or the people we saw and what the interactions were about. So I'm constantly, so even in my bio at one point in time, at the end of my bio, I have very interesting, or what was the word I used? I can't remember, but riveting conversations. That was it.
Yes.
Riveting conversations with my kids on a daily basis. So
Absolutely.
I knew, I'm not going to say I knew everything that was going on in my son's life, but I'm sure I knew 90% of what was happening in his life, because every day we would get on the phone or through text and we would debrief. What happened today? How did your job go? Blah, blah, blah. Whatever it was, I wanted to be in the know. I don't like surprises, right? Especially with the people who are in my vicinity, my immediate vicinity. I don't want to be surprised by your life, your actions. So I always had those debriefing conversations. And I think it's a part of being an educator, because one of the things that you also mentioned, and we call it self-reflection, right? So as an educator, I have to reflect on a regular basis. If I taught a lesson and over, say, 75% of the class failed that test, now I have to look inward to figure out what it is that I did wrong that caused them not to be able to understand what I was trying to teach. Because one of the most powerful things my grandmother told me was, she was an educator before she became a bank manager. And one day I came home and I said, I don't know, I was gloating over some nonsense. And she got so upset with me. And she goes, "You are a teacher. Your job is to teach. If you don't teach, what she said, if there is not learning happening, then you're not teaching." She said, it's that simple.
It's that simple.
If the kids are not learning, it's because you are not teaching effectively. And that was like a slap in my face. I remember being annoyed. I remember being like, you're old. Like, this teaching today is different. That's kind of how I was arrogant. I was in my 20s. And then I stopped and I self-reflected. And I was just like, you know something? She's right. You're right. If I'm standing up there for 6 hours a day and I'm just running my mouth, but my students are not grasping what it is that I am putting on. And every student is not going to do it, but 75% of the students in my class should be passing the test with at least a C and above, right? And so it made me become a better teacher. That conversation with my grandmother, that self-reflection made me become a better teacher. One of the things I've been in therapy for the last 3 years. I mean, we talked about this before, but I've been in therapy for the last 3 years since my son passed away. And one of the things that my therapist always says, she says, I think you are the most self-aware client that I know, that I've ever met. And it's because I have learned that skill that you're talking about, self-reflection. If something isn't going right, I don't blame everything and everyone around me. I sit down and I figure out, what role did I play in what's happening to me right now? And then I take ownership of that first. And then I said, okay, and then what role did the other people around me play in what has happened to me? Whether it be people, things, whatever it is, right? And then just what you said, then I have to make a decision.
Yeah, you got to make a choice.
What am I going to do about it?
Yeah, now what's next? And then that decision, and thank you for sharing that. It's all about, have to or choose to.
Right.
Have to or choose to, right? And that I always play in, is it a have to or is it a choose to? Which one's going to empower? It's going to, I think, choose to.
Right.
Because if it's a have to, then it's,
exactly.
Yes, you got the drama, you got the emotion, you drag it out. I don't want to clean. We got to clean the basement. I don't want to clean the basement. We have to clean the basement. If we say we choose to clean the basement, then we go on a different journey. Right? We choose to clean the basement. Anytime you clear something out, always go to the deepest, darkest space that you don't frequent that you frequent the least. That's where you begin. Right? Yes. Okay. Got it. And so the other thing that I lived in too is being comfortable in the uncomfortable. When we become comfortable in life.
I say that all the time.
Right?
People think I'm crazy every time I say it. I was like, you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
That's right. And I live in that space, and I've been singing that song for years. Be comfortable in the uncomfortable, because we know that's when that's where life happens.
That's when transition happens. Exactly.
Transitions happen in the uncomfortable. Once we get comfortable, it always goes wrong. It hasn't failed yet. When we get comfortable and what happened? It's like whiplash. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are the two spaces where I really play, right? Is to
Okay.
have to choose comfortable and uncomfortable.
Yeah, I
Those
love
two
it.
spaces, right? And those are not polarizing. I think
No.
that I think that those two spaces really play well in that, well, how did it go? Let's look at it. That to me, all of those three components in my mind create critical thinking skills. I think
They
they
do.
elevate our critical thinking skills
They
when we
do.
really sit in it, like
Mhm.
really sit in it. Another one of my favorites is separate the emotion from the what so. Again, these all point toward critical thinking, emotional
Mhm.
intelligence, emotional
Emotional intelligence,
right?
yes.
So I'm not saying all those, those academic and psychological, no, just we're
Mhm.
just talking. And
Mhm.
I think that's the other thing that where we are right now in general. And that's the other reason why I do the work that I do. It's really about people say, Carol, what do you do? I said, I help people attempt to figure out how to talk to each other on a daily basis at work. That's what I do. Very simple.
Mhm.
And so for me, being that connector, being that go-to resource person, being that bridge within
Mhm.
my workplace, honestly, is the other reason why. And being a student, right? Everything that I do, I work on me first. So this
Right.
isn't just me teaching this information or sharing this information or sharing these quotes or ideas. No, 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 no. This work is in constant motion
Mhm.
because I'm working on it. So I become a student of my work. I think that that's really important as well. And so when I work with folks, to your point, you asking me, that's the reason why I named my company Radiance Resources,
Mhm.
because I'm always the resource point. People come to me for everything. That's great.
Mhm.
And then I shed light on it in a different way,
Mm.
right? To help them. My personal mission statement that I developed in one of my courses during my master's degree program experience was basically my mission is to help people live their life's purpose. Very simple. And so I choose to become my own student of my own life's purpose.
Yeah.
Therefore, it ripples effect out.
Right.
Very
Right.
simple. Yeah.
One of the things that you talked about um, was perfectionism. And I
Mm,
find that
yeah.
that is a crippling effect, especially in the entrepreneurship space. A lot of people will not move forward until they feel like everything is
It's
perfect.
perfect.
The
Yeah.
website, the landing page, the
Yeah.
email funnel, the graphics
Yeah.
for their social
Yeah.
media, like themselves. So
Yes.
I may think I'm overweight. That may be facts, but me showing up here today, I could have sat back and I have at some point in time, oh, I'm going to lose 30 pounds, let's say in the next 3 months. And when I lose those 30 pounds, then I'm going to be camera ready. Right. But if I don't lose the 30 pounds, does that mean that I never get on camera? And I find perfectionism is a crippler of progress,
Yes.
basically.
Yes.
Right. So let's
Yeah,
talk
I get
about that.
that. Yeah. And so I actually have done some work on this a little bit more and found some really interesting journals and articles about it and
Mhm.
the construct of it. And there's actually is from about a few years back, there's actually two different types of perfectionism, which is kind of
Okay.
interesting.
Okay.
So, one is adaptive perfectionists, to your
Mhm.
point, that tend to set like a really high standard, right? They're motivated in achieving, whatever they want to achieve, right? And
Right.
then, they may look at their faults, both negative and positive. Who knows,
Mhm.
right? But hopefully, they look at them to adapt to grow. And then the other one is called maladaptive perfectionism,
Mhm.
right? And so it's one of those where they can't even derive any satisfaction, right, from their accomplishments. And they are worried about meeting their own and others' expectations.
Mhm.
That work actually came from It was coined from Gordon Flett and Paul Hewlett, rather, who took additional information from 2001 from a group from Stanley Rice, Mobley, and Tripley and Ashby, right? When they were playing with it from a psychological perspective. And so I thought that was really, really, really interesting work to really say, where are the strengths of perfectionism, to your point, in the balance? We all have perfectionism traits, but it's the balancing act. So for me, I've also had a mind shift as far as, let's just take losing weight. I no longer look at it as losing weight. I look at it as, how do I balance my insulin? Because that's the real conversation.
Got
Right?
you.
How do I balance? What are ways that I can balance my insulin? Okay, that means that I'm choosing to ingest more fiber, more protein, fat. Here I'm going with this, more complex carbs,
Carbohydrates, yeah.
and not as much simple carbs. Hear the language difference?
Yeah.
And to drink water with maybe a little more mineral salt or electrolytes, right? Okay. Hear the difference? Because I was in that mode. I was in that mood too, and that moving first, then food, then supplements. So that's how I've shifted my brain in that. Now
Got you.
that's taken years to do it.
Oh, yes.
And I've been in perimenopause for a moment, but so that's how you see what I mean? So that's how I've chosen to shift it. Perfectionism is, what are the strengths that come to a person, right, within that space of perfectionism, right? Because sometimes attention to detail is a good thing until it works, until it doesn't work. Sometimes attention to detail is great. And then sometimes perfectionism really lies because of fear of failure, because of past experience.
Yes.
Okay, so if we've had trauma, we got let's look at that. Then what are ways that we could create the balance, right? So in sometimes I have a difficulty overlooking small mistakes. And the biggest thing I need to do, okay, I'm choosing, let it go, let it go. So I sing this song all the time, let it go, right? And so, right? So it's like, so therefore I'm not setting unreasonable standards. I'm setting standards, not unreasonable standards. I actually had a manager, her ceiling was so high, it was 3 times higher than her.
Oh, wow.
And I get to her ceiling. It was the hardest work I've ever done, and it was the most growth I've ever had. That's how high her expectation was of herself. It was different.
That could be stressful on the mind and the body as well.
Absolutely. And at the same time, it was the best time I had, because that was a huge space. That was one of the big lifts that I needed to get myself where I wanted to be. Would I do it again? Not really.
Probably
I
not.
do it differently. But it was just. And the other thing is that another one that we play in perfectionism is being focused only on the results instead of really looking at the journey. And that's the other place where I have played as well. Let's have fun in the journey.
Yes.
To our point, let's debrief every step so we can enjoy the journey.
And for me
you know what I mean? And then it blows up so beautifully, because what we set out to do, it never shows up the way we think it will.
No, absolutely not.
And for me, if it blows up even bigger than we had expected, my goodness, what joy.
Yes. Yes. One of the things that I have my clients do is to keep a journal when we're going on a specific journey to a expected outcome. Keep a journal of the things that you did, the active steps that you took along the way to get to this point. And when you get there, even if you didn't meet the mark, right, you can look back and see that you did what it took to meet the mark. And you can also take that journal and analyze where you went wrong.
Absolutely.
right? So that we
and
can pivot
yeah,
and do it again because we're not going to give up on it. We're just
exactly.
going to pivot,
And
right? And
the
we're
light
going to,
exactly. You made a
yeah.
choice, and here's the results of the choice.
Hmm. Hmm.
There it is. That's it.
Yeah.
Here's the result of the choice. Okay. Now what?
Yeah, but I find a lot of people tend to beat themselves up, over things like so I just this is a little personal, but I think it's
That's good.
it's a
A little
a
bit.
good thing to talk about here.
Yeah.
I suffer from high blood pressure, right? Really bad. I started I was diagnosed with high blood pressure when I was 16,
Oh, got it.
right? And um some of it is genetic, but
Sure.
well, most of it is genetic because my father has really bad high blood pressure. But anyways, um, I was a very tightly wound individual. I'm an
Mm,
introvert, and I do things to make myself an extrovert. I'm
sure.
not an extrovert or omnivert because I don't think I'll ever be an extrovert. I'm an
Sure.
introvert by nature. I
Right.
like to be by myself. I'm not really a people person, but if I'm put in a situation, I will
You can
excel.
do
You
that.
would think I'm an
You
extrovert.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
people think I'm an extrovert because
Right.
they see me in social settings and I am, you
Mhm.
know, almost like a social butterfly. But I had to
Mhm.
learn that as a teacher because I can't be an introvert inside my classroom.
Right.
So I have to wear
Right.
different hats based on the
Sure.
situation that I'm in. So I'm a
Mhm.
highly adaptable person. I
Mhm.
can adapt. Do I want to adapt? No. But do I have to adapt? Yes. Right. In order to get to where I want to get to, I have to adapt to situations, especially as a business owner. If I was just working in a corporate office, maybe not just go and stamp my temp card, do what I got to do, and I'm out. But as a
Sure.
business owner, you can't do that. But going back to having high blood pressure. So when I was younger, like I would take on issues. I'm a fixer. So that's
Mm,
why I'm a strategist, right? Because I'm a fixer. I
sure.
like to fix things and I can walk into a business and I can tell you where all the gaps are almost instantaneously.
Mm.
Having one conversation with you, that is one of my gifts. You talked about what skills, gifts, and talents, right?
Balance.
So one
Yep.
of my gifts is that, right? And so I was always trying to fix the people in my family, fix my friends, fix. I'm just fixing everything and
Sure.
everybody,
Sure.
but I'm not taking the time to fix me. And my mom said to me one day, you know what your problem is? Your standards are so high,
Yeah.
right? For yourself.
Right.
Then you take those standards and you put them on other people,
Right.
right?
Right.
You need not judge people based on your own standards and take people for who they are as
Mhm.
they come to you. You either take them or you
Mhm.
reject them. But trying to
Exactly.
fix them, you're going to have a life of misery if you consistently try to fix people.
Yeah.
I wish I had listened back then. I
Mhm.
probably would not have suffered for so many years with chronic migraine headaches and severe high blood pressure that led to other issues. Once I learned to let go of things that don't directly affect me and
Mm,
things that I cannot fix because
sure.
of whatever reason,
For whatever reason.
I lowered my stress level tremendously.
Yes. Yes.
Tremendously. I mean,
Yes.
it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. And I was just like, and it didn't happen until after my mom passed.
Mm.
Or just right before, because we
Mm.
had gone to Mexico for some cancer treatment for
Mm.
her.
Mm.
And while we were there, we were able, 3 weeks we were together in this hotel room, we were able to debrief, with each other about what
Yeah.
had been right,
Right.
wrong in our relationships, and that come to peace. She died at the end of that year.
Mm.
So I think we were just given that time to really,
Absolutely.
like, yes,
Absolutely. No doubt.
right?
No doubt.
And she made me promise a few things in that conversation. And I upheld, for the most part, some of the things that she asked me to do. And one of the things that she asked me to do was to let things go.
Mm.
Walk away from
Mm.
stop trying to fix people,
Mhm.
learn
Mhm.
to love yourself unconditionally and
Mhm.
deal with yourself and your children and
Mhm.
stop. And everybody else are just additions to your life. They're
Correct.
not your job.
Correct. They're not.
you know?
They're not.
So, yeah,
They're not.
and once I did that, my life changed for the better.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that. It's one of those where I think that is those life lessons couldn't come sooner because we wouldn't be ready for them.
Well, that's true too. That is true too. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's one of those where it's like, I think things come on their time and not on our time.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they're always there. You know, the answers
Mhm.
are always around us. Literally.
Yeah,
They're
they
literally
are.
around us. It's simply a matter of us like, "Oh, got it." You know, we
That
call
light
it
bulb moment.
we call the Burton oh. You know, we call,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, yeah,
Mhm.
alright." You know, light bulb, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's
Yeah.
the reason why for me, I really, I've really taken on Dr. Tony Alexandria's work from the early 90s when he talked about the platinum rule. There's 5 rules. We've
Mhm.
lived in the golden rule for so many millennia, which is fantastic. The platinum rule is, treat others as they want to be treated. I
Yes.
take that further and assert more. And so, step into their shoes, see how life, see their life through their lens, not through mine.
Mhm. Mhm.
And people go, well, wouldn't the person get lost in that? Absolutely not. It's quite the opposite, because then that to me is that mutual symbiotic relationship thing that happens.
Mhm.
And it's another way of supporting each other. I think I look at myself as an introvert as well. And I've chosen to learn how to be on stage differently. I used to be on stage as a way, to your point of that that perfectionism,
Mhm.
and when I stepped off the stage and really looked at the power of the stage, or the power I was giving to the stage, I
Mhm.
realized that wasn't, it worked until it didn't work, and it really never did.
Mhm.
And so in that, I really sat in, okay, what is this thing that I'm really supposed to be doing?
Mhm.
And it was, why what why am I moving through life so hard right now? That was
Mhm.
the other questions for me. And it was really simple. Oh, I gotta learn this. Oh, okay, I'm sitting in this now. Yes, you are. Okay. Right. And so really sitting into the self-reflection, into that transitional work.
Mhm.
Um, that, it's at the point where now, Tracy, if everything is moving and then things stop, like,
Mhm.
boom, stop, I go, "Oh, it's time for me to evolve.
Yes.
I choose to sit in it.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
choosing to sit in it, and I'm
Mhm.
choosing to be comfortable in this new uncomfortability,
Mhm.
and know that everything will be okay, and
Yeah.
know that I will land,
Mhm.
I will, okay, got it."
Mhm.
Sometimes,
Mhm.
some people go, "Oh my gosh, this is going on for so long." It's a moment. It can be a long moment. It
Yeah.
can be a short moment, but it can be a long
Sometimes the
moment,
moments are pretty long, yes.
right? And that tells me, it's like, okay, what do I choose to surrender to,
Mhm.
right? To really let it go. I let it go. No, I didn't. Okay, now I'm
Mhm.
kind of letting it go. You're not letting it go. Okay, now I'm letting it go.
Yeah.
No, you're not. Okay, now I've let it go. Got it. There it is. So I'm saying the same thing, but it's how I'm saying it depending on
Yeah.
where I'm at,
Mhm. Mhm.
and being okay with it. And I think that's the biggest thing about, to your point about perfectionism,
Mhm.
is what are the strength areas of perfectionism that I can use to help me balance everything
Mhm.
and be okay with nothing, right? Okay.
Mhm.
If it's nothing, because I'm choosing to let that emotion go with it. Yeah, you are.
Mhm.
And so that is and know that abundance will still be there. So I play adaptive mindset, different
Mhm.
perspective thinking, the transition, because we are, every day we're in some type of a transition, even if we're
Yes.
breathing in, sleeping to wake up, whatever that looks like. That's a transition.
It
When
is.
we move to do something, that's a transition. We're in it don't have to be a big thing. We're in transition constantly.
Yeah.
And so it's, all right, I trust myself. That's the other thing about all this work you and I do. It's really about trusting yourself as far as I'm concerned. And that's the other reason why I'm doing this work too. If I'm not trusting myself, nobody else will.
Very true.
I'm taking care of myself, nobody else will. And I was just presenting at a summit this past weekend. And it's one of those where if, I had to remind one of the participants, one of the learners, I'm like, okay, what do they say on an airplane? When the oxygen in the cabin goes down,
put yours on first.
You got to put yourself on first before you put everybody else on.
Yeah.
Same exact conversation. So I think sometimes right now we don't want to trust ourselves. I really do. I think that it's easier to have people do things for us or think for us. That's easy. I live in the space of I want to live in abundance. I don't want to live in scarcity. I want to live in learning ways to trust myself. A few weeks back, I leased a car a couple years ago, and I knew that I would end up buying this car, and I didn't know how I was going to pay for the car. Now, that's a conscious conversation of scarcity. Right? And then close to the end of the lease, I said, I got to figure this out. And the first thing I said to myself, Tracy, was, I've got this. That's trust yourself. That's languaging towards trust yourself, right? And then I realized that it wasn't, because I've been hearing the auto industry is falling apart. It's it's its lowest it's ever been. You got to have $15,000 to $20,000 for a 2-cent car. You know what I mean? Like all this stuff, all this noise, this external noise is part of transition. This external noise instead of the internal signals that point the way. And in that, I was like, wait a minute, Carole, you've been working on your credit. Yep, I have. To consistently keep it at a good number, right? To sustain it. So I started saying, okay, Carole, you've been doing this. What are the things that I've been doing to remain consistent? Consistent. And so I called my insurance representative. They were like, yep, this is what's going on in the market, but go do this, this, and this. You don't have to do nothing else, Carole, because you work. You're here. You're here. Don't worry about it, Carole. I was like, okay. So I called my dealership, and he was like, Carole, you've always done this, 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 the same thing the insurance person said. This, and this. He was like, just fill out the pre-approval form. I filled it out, and it was it was during when the third-party group of Microsoft, all that was going on. And I called the next day. He was like, we're good. Just come on in.
Awesome.
An hour and a half later, got my car. You see what I mean? So it was like, what are ways that I can trust myself? What are ways that I know all will be well? What are ways that I could have an adaptive and abundance mindset as I move through the transition in life, knowing that I will be okay? That's where I play, regardless of who the subject matter is and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to solve. That's where I play. And I think that's where I think that as I talked at the top of our time today about active listening, active observing, active reflection, and then active hope. I gave myself hope because I was learning, I was listening, observing, and reflecting.
Right. And that is an excellent point to wrap up on. So before we go, what are 3 things that you would like to leave the audience with when it comes to whether it's work work-life balance, self-reflection, or perfectionism, any of those topics?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to acknowledge that you are fantastic where you are right now in life. And to really acknowledge, even though you may have been through a lot, you're here and you're being called forth in this moment. The second thing is to really love and appreciate your skills, gifts, and talents. And the third one is to trust yourself and know that all will be okay. Because I'm living and shifting my mind from scarcity into abundance, my mind into how do I adapt instead of assimilate, my mind in I've got this to empower myself. That is the real conversation.
Awesome. And tell us, what makes you an impactor?
Humility, gratitude, and sincerity in creating meaningful relationships. I learn more from you than I hope to learn more from you than you do from me. And that's how we impact each other.
Yep, I like it. So, Carole, tell the audience how they can find you and work with you.
Sure. So radianceresources.com is the name of my amazing organization. I hang out on LinkedIn. You can play
She
with
hangs
me
out
on
on
I
LinkedIn.
hang out on LinkedIn. You can play with me on Facebook and Instagram, but I really hang out on LinkedIn. And I do have a podcast. It's some of my foundational work called Radiance Real Talk. And so that's where you can find me. And, I'm one of those that I really work with people who really want to make real change, regardless of what that change looks like, that real shift to empower themselves, whatever that looks like. If you're attempting to meet numbers, if you're attempting to meet goals, if you're attempting to live, literally live. If you want to transition and you're not sure how, that's where I play, individual and in teams. And with the mental health first aid, that is a really quick, because you asked me that.
Oh, yes, I did. I forgot about that.
Mental health first aid is a fantastic certification. It's very much like CPR, and it's early prevention. It's early prevention, skills-based information that is about an 8-hour training that's good for 3 years. It's good for 3 years certification to really help people in different spaces of mental health need. Whatever that need is, you actually go through and learn it. And what I've learned is that it's another way of communicating. It's another way of connecting with people, just having those skills, the skills that you got, as far as like another way of utilizing those skills of being aware, self-awareness, other awareness, right? Connecting and communicating. So it's just another tool. That's all.
Okay. All right. Well, Carole, I enjoyed our conversation
Thank
with
you.
you today. And I want to thank you for coming on to Impactors Out Loud. And I know that the audience would have gotten something meaningful from this conversation because it was a powerful conversation about self. Right.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I really am thankful for you being on here today.
Thank you.
And to the audience, if you are trying to work on yourself, reach out to Carole, right?
Let's play.
You can see that she is very knowledgeable about the subject matter. And I feel that if you truly want to get into the uncomfortable place, because like she
Yes.
said, the uncomfortable place is where growth happens.
Yes.
But the uncomfortable place makes you so uncomfortable, you're not sure if you have the skills, the innate skills to get out of that place, then reach out to her and let her
Absolutely.
help you to get beyond that point. All
Yes.
right. All right. Thank you again, everyone, for joining me again today on Impactors Out Loud. And I'll